keep the, all those trails to the east? Oh, but that's not part of the motion, or is it?
Well,
Sorry.
I
To
think it
keep
would
them
be good.
as mowed trails and not crushed
Right,
granite.
correct. So it's, even though it's
Right.
not numbered, it's any of the trails east of the gathering space would be mowed.
Would be
Not
mowed
DG.
trails and not crushed granite.
Right.
And so the ARC, or what's been referred to as the D,
D.
that's not included either, correct? That's the number, that's number.
There was mixed feeling on that, so I think
Well,
that could be in a future phase.
That's,
not in
so
phase
your
one.
motion does not include that?
Correct.
Right. So,
Oh, and, right, no connection to, at least phase one, no connection to
290. So that little tail goes away and it just loops around.
Yeah.
Is that? Longest
gives you-
motion?
so just for
Yeah.
purpose of clarification, I think Ben wants to make sure that they understand what the
Sorry,
motion entails.
just to clarify if possible. So the section that does make the D, could that just be a less wide path? So not with the intention of having farmers market stalls along it, but just, let's say you want to take a right at the end of the farmers market, just in terms of circulation, we could reconfigure it if we just want to reduce footprint, but I'm just saying there might need to be some trail connections that do come out of those areas. It doesn't maybe need to be as much, but it does kind of make sense to, approach the pavilion. If you don't want to go in the pavilion, you take a right. And so you can like go out into the trails without having to go into the pavilion. So some of those might just be reconfigured. Some of them might need to be remain, but maybe just be changed a little bit.
So what I would say is the D, we could have the construction documents for that for future. But
Okay.
for phase one, we don't do that. We're able to see how it gets used. So proof of concept, if you will, that we build this and will they come?
Yes, and I'm not
Before
saying it
we
would be
do more.
for farmers markets, but just so that you could access the other trails. It would just be mown. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
It doesn't need to be a big circle. Just make the connections a mown pathway
okay,
for phase one, and then we'll see where we go.
okay.
So I'm gonna make sure I get the motion in the intent of it. So the motion is to move forward with a schematic design that includes
Construction documents.
construction documents and it includes in phase one, for this phase one construction document, the pavilion, which is item number 1, 2, which is the gateway entry plaza, 3, which is the portable restroom area, 4, which is the roundabout turn access, 8, which is the parallel parking along Master Sergeant Horgan, 9, which is pickleball, and then picnic tables and a small nature area per Public Works. And the rest of the plan would be for the future, and any trails would be mown trails.
Correct.
That's the motion.
And the connection from that point,
Is not included. There's not a mown trail or anything.
No.
It's just, okay, so no connection to 290 from a trail
Correct.
access point of view. Okay. That's the motion. Is there a second, or, sorry?
Well,
Let's
I
the
have a
motion on
question,
the
I have a
table.
question about the motion.
Sure.
Because I thought you had mentioned the playground area was part of that. Did I
Yeah,
miss that in your
the small
summary?
nature playgrounds.
Small nature
The nature
playground is what it
playground
is, yeah.
is part of the motion? Thank you.
yes.
I'm willing to second.
Okay, so in that second, let's open it for discussion. Council, is that clear in terms of what, what the intention is and the scope of that direction for this construction documents?
Could you, it would be helpful to me if you could tell us what's left off, because
Sure.
it looks like most
So
of it
what's-
is
so
covered.
what's-
So what,
what
and
is-
if I could preface that by asking the question, it sounds like at this stage that there's no crushed gravel anywhere. Is that,
Crushed granite.
crushed granite, I'm sorry, thank you. Is that true?
Just right there. The picnic, yeah,
And all of that.
but not a big D. The D would not be there at this point.
And I assume this trail remains on the triangle?
Yes. And that should be
triangle,
utilized for tents for the market.
Yeah.
We should still utilize
the
that.
triangle, the path to the pickleball, and then here would be crushed granite.
So what's the thought?
So what's left off is basically all of this, except it would, well, this would be mowed, this is gone, and the bandstand is gone. I did not hear the bandstand as part of the motion, so.
Okay, and that's using the current pavilion design, I'm assuming from this, or is there any, and council can obviously make a discussion about any feedback for that, but I didn't hear any specifics about changes to that design.
No, I like the design, and I think it should be a permanent pavilion structure. And I think in the long term, it'll be, have more durability, and we won't be replacing sails or any of that kind of thing.
Okay,
And I think it will be something we can be proud of.
so is it, this intention is to start, or to put in the budget, the budget for construction documents for this, this phase. We wouldn't actually be approving that until the budget came around. So that's just another note for both council as well as residents. So additional council discussion before opening back up to the public for their feedback. Councilmember Johnson.
Was there a second?
Yes,
Dave.
Councilmember Burrow seconded, yeah.
Okay, apologies. Two questions here. Since we're moving the entire pavilion southeast, what was the plan, to leave that as asphalt or to reclaim that to grass?
Oh, I think we would take the asphalt out and it would just be raised up to the same level as everything else around it,
Okay.
the curb and everything. So yeah, the asphalt I think would still come out.
And
It'd just
So
be it'd be
those-
grass.
Those three, or these DG paths would need to extend a little bit to get, so that there would be paths, you know, leading up to those kind of entrances to the. Does that
so
make
there'd be
sense?
like a path on the outside? Or,
So, hang on. Basically paths, so the paths would extend, right? There'd be longer paths getting you from the parking lot to the, and then,
right, but
and then also the idea too is that there would be load in and load out happening along this area as well.
well, that's. Oh, but so they could just like bring their cars.
So
they're not gonna drive.
so vendors, for example, that have like, you know, large trucks, refrigerated trucks would pull up and then, you know, they can load and load out. But
Okay, and who does the construction documents?
that would be, Mend and Freeland Turk would work on it.
Okay, and do we know roughly?
And an architect and potentially, electrical engineers if we want to have lighting in the pavilion, things like that.
Okay, if
And we do have a cost estimate for that fee, again, estimated by me, and I am not a professional in any of those fields, but we are going to be speaking with architects and other industries to get competitive kind of proposals to see who we want to work with. But we estimated the professional services for construction documents to be about $240K to $290K out of the total entirety of the construction documents. And that includes surveying and other fields like that.
okay.
Other questions from council? Open it back up for the public to make comments.
Melissa Gonzalez, Public Works. I would encourage a friendly amendment to the number 4, because if you go back to the recommendations from Public Works, an actual road engineer professor said he didn't like it. And I do think that that would be worth exploring, given the weight of that. He does not like a roundabout with 2 legs. He was opposed to that. And so I think it would be worthwhile, given that level of objection, that we modify that aspect. And I think there's merit to it. I actually agree with him. That's the other thing. I am totally in support that if we put a pavilion there, that it is very aesthetic and not unattractive. I also would suggest that it is organic. I am one of the people who would really like it to be less visible, so that it feels like it's still wild and it doesn't feel like a backyard. That's my concern. That is my concern about this, especially as it's now ooching over to the right, is that it feels like I'm walking around in nature. I know other people don't agree with that, but it does, and I don't want to lose that. And so if you can do things to make it look less obtrusive, but still a nice thing, I think that's important. I think that would be optimal. Curved roofs are nice. I know they're expensive, but having some structure like that. But I showed examples of that from another farmer's market. But that's and we need it to breathe. It needs to have light. I'm just going to say some of the things that people did. Another friend of mine made great commentaries. I think she sent it, and if not, I'll send it back. So that it breathes and it doesn't feel like you can't. They do the ones where they're sort of like that, and then there's a top so you get some airflow. Otherwise, it's going to be really hot. Those sort of native Texas kinds of buildings that allow it to breathe out the top. Those are important things to consider as we do this. But again, that gives you added height. So it's a challenge that we really need to consider. But I think if you look at some of the traditional Texas buildings before we had air conditioning, that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Burton Pearson, I want to know, there was a couple of these numbers that P&E, we had 7 members on the committee and one person was absent that day. And so we were at 6. And so I think we tied our vote on a couple of these items. And I think we have that data. It says, Carolyn, I think you have the
So the only 2 that P&E didn't have consensus on were 6 and 7. Those were the 2 that didn't have consensus, and there were some splits. That's the nature play area and the bandstand, and so, the kids play area. And so what Public Works did recommend including that in phase 1 as a nature play area. There were definitely some members of P&E who were for it, and there were some who are against.
Yeah. So 6 and 7, we didn't have a clear outcome from P&E. So we did not necessarily support the play area as part of phase 1. And I want to make sure that that's clear. The other thing I want to say is this whole Crescent Trail was not part of schematic number 1 that most people voted for. So, and I didn't hear when they read the little Post-it comments, I didn't hear people say, oh, we want that Crescent Trail. So it seems to me that had to do with one of the other schematics, and I don't know why it's even on this drawing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ross Ponder again. I'll be brief. I've never played pickleball. The only time I've used one is that court out yonder, and Chief Carter might appreciate this. There's these youth on the motorbikes, and they just come ripping through the trails sometimes. I had to yell at them maybe a month ago. It wasn't get off my lawn. It was, don't do that here. There's young kids. But whatever y'all decide, I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. Thank you.
All right, anybody else wish to speak at this time? All right, going back to Councilmember Menegas.
To the comment about what Public Works said, I didn't really understand why that was a problem with the drop-off circle there. And so if we could just have you explain.
I'm not an engineer. So I think we're looking forward to working with Freeland Turk on what that looks like. Only men put together this schematic design. We thought the roundabout would be a good way to just bring people up, drop them off, have people be able to turn around and then head right back down MSG Bob Horgan. It's a schematic design, so we're still at a really high level concept, and it can absolutely change based on the professional engineers' feedback, Freeland Turk and other best practices, absolutely.
So the other concern, so I thought it was a good way to drop off, like if someone's in a wheelchair or a motor scooter, they could just be dropped off there. But then that also brings up the question of, from the parking lot, the cut into that. So when we look at engineering, considering those things.
Yeah, thank you.
If I could just add to the conversation, not only is that a very important part of the overall plan, but from the AISD perspective, it's a very significant intersection for breakout in their events. When their events are over, there's a lot of people trying to get out in a very short period of time. And that configuration needs to be modified to at least maintain what they have or improve upon it. I love the drop-off feature, and I want to keep that. But the left side of that whole intersection needs to be rethought.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, there's a part of it that reminds me of when you're kind of like looking at your GPS and you're driving, especially in Europe, and you see this like roundabout and it looks like a big intersection, then you get there and it's just like 5 feet across. And I think that it's going to be incredibly tight. And right out front of here, we have just like tire marks all over these very broad turns. That thing's going to be like just completely trampled. Ross, was that a vote to get rid of the pickleball?
I'm just saying my experience.
All right. It's going to turn into a youth bike park.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So my idea is hard because I can't draw it for you, but my idea is to make the drop off a very secondary part of that intersection and route as much traffic through the left side of that roundabout as possible.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, there was, I was at the Public Works Committee meeting where we discussed, where this roundabout was discussed, and I got the impression that the chair had a different vision of what this does, because his opening criticism is that the roundabouts have multiple entry and exits, and that this really doesn't serve that function. So I think, I speculate that perhaps he's thinking of a roundabout in the sense of traffic control or a traffic feature, as opposed to basically just a way for people to get in and unload their stuff. I mean, that's really what the function of this is. And whether it's round or whatever it is, I think whatever the function is, the function of having vendors have a way to load and unload their stuff in an efficient way, I think that's important. It should continue to be included in the plan and the construction documents. Now, what it looks like, I'll leave that to people that are more expert at working those functions. But I don't think it's particularly necessary I don't think we want to just throw that out. I think we need to make sure that the function is served.
Councilmember Rosengart.
I'm concerned about the roundabout because even though it's not a true roundabout, if traffic is coming up Horgan Trail and you have people in the circle parked to unload, can the other people get past and still go to Tony Burger Center? Whereas if you had a regular road, if somebody pulled off, if there's a little more width at the top there, they could pull off to the side and people can still go by. But on the roundabout, you have to have room for that circle.
It's maybe a little hard to see, but there's sort of like a gray strip that's above the roadway. That would be the intention of that space, is that you would be able to pull in, park temporarily, unload, drop somebody off, and then pull out and continue down. And I guess if you were driving up and that space was occupied, I think it would accommodate a couple cars, you might need to just go down and kind of loop back until someone was ready to leave, and then you could take a spot and drop your stuff off.
Mr. McGraw?
If I could ask a question about that, I mean, maybe Councilmember Medicus might be able to address this since she has direct experience with working as a vendor at these events. But is there a reason why someone that, say, has a 10 assignment at the north end of the pavilion can pull into the parking lot and much closer to where they're going, so they don't have to lug all their stuff so far? I mean, can they access the pavilion?
They would be able to access the pavilion from, there are 1, 2, 3 instances where the path intersects with the parking lot, both within the pavilion and then at the very north end of the pavilion. So you could, if you were a vendor, just pull into the parking lot itself, right up next to that curb, and then unload from there if you'd like to as well.
So 100% of the tents and equipment doesn't have to go through what we're calling the roundabout? Is that
No,
correct?
it doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact, I would think that maybe that would be more used for people being dropped off, or if you drop someone off in a wheelchair or something like that, rather than goods. Yes.
So I think what'll happen is, a lot of the vendors that have the trucks, and they like to have their truck close by, that they'll probably put them, be able to park in the parking lot and back up to that curb so that they can access the truck when they're in the pavilion. I would think that's how they'll set that up.
Yes.
But I see those little paths now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh. That was fast.
So, just to kind of describe my thoughts here, the drop-off area, or the kind of handle on the right, is kind of deliberate. I'm sorry. Yeah, so the handle is more of a deliberate drop-off road, and the breakout traffic or the entry traffic for events stays on those 2 lanes to the left. And you notice that the radius of those 2 lanes is a lot longer than what's shown on the current space, because you want to accommodate traffic leaving as soon as possible, and we do that with long radiuses and smooth curves and things like that. So another, I guess, downside to this is we would have to collaborate with AISD. We would need more space to build this, but it's in their best interest, and it's better than what they have today. So they should be interested in collaborating with us.
Other discussion from council? Questions? All right, so the motion that we have is to move forward with schematic design for the what's that? You had it written down?
So
Okay.
moving forward with construction documents for phase 1 to include the pavilion structure, which is presented as custom design and built, to the welcome plaza, the portable toilet space, the loading zone, yet designed to be TBD, gathering area with picnic tables, small nature play area, parallel parking along MSG Bob Horgan, and the pickleball courts. And other notes that trails east of the gathering space are mowed paths only, not decomposed granite, and no connection at this time to 290. And I think the one clarification I would ask is, so we're not including any, this is not being included in the construction documents at this time, correct?
Did you say pickleball court?
Pickleball courts was included, yes.
in phase one,
But we want them in the documents, or no? That's the,
I would say for the purposes of this, let's move forward with just the phase one items.
got it.
We can revisit that later.
yeah. As the market grows and we decide we need more space, then we can address that then, right?
Clarification, just because it wasn't listed here, but so parallel parking was listed, but what about a path, basically because right now there's no sidewalk. So I think it was intended too that there be a sidewalk or shared use path
Oh, I see.
on Bob Horde.
Up Oregon, yes.
Existing path on Jones to.
Right.
Which I don't know if P
I
and E
didn't see,
discussed.
yeah. Well, that would make sense.
So that,
I
that's
think all three concepts had some.
Yes,
that
had a
was meant to
connection.
be a part. Is it connect?
A sidewalk, yes.
Connecting it to our existing sidewalks on Jones Road.
And what we decided not to do is that other section that got added to that, which is Stadium Drive and all that, right?
Correct.
Right, not doing that.
Yeah, so.
That's
the
included in number
sidewalk.
8. Okay.
Yes, the sidewalk from Jones.
Is that clear on your mind too, Councilmember Burrell, since you were the second? That's what your intention was? Okay. All right, all those in favor of moving forward with the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay, due to the process and the expense.
And so the next step, that motion passes. The next step in this process will be, we will get a task order that's proposed for the budget, and then we'll be reviewing the cost and potential changes at that time, if there are concerns. But moving forward with this as the next step in the project, and looking also for those grant opportunities that were mentioned would be a good start to that, since some of them are due in the very near term. All right, so council, we do have one last agenda item. We are not going to be able to spend a lot of time on this. So we are agenda item number 14. This is a discussion only item. And thank you, Mend, and thank you for our engineering team for sticking out this long. Item number 14, which is presentation and discussion of Villa's PUD. And so I want to at least introduce this item. I want to make sure that this comes back for further council discussion. During the zoning commission meeting where the zoning case for 1030 Sunflower Trail was being decided, there was a recommendation from zoning, in addition to recommending moving forward with the zoning change, but they recommended revisiting the PUD, given that there is a confusion around the process of, how the impervious cover is actually documented or codified. Some of the questions that were raised by residents with regards to, the PUD itself, the changes that we may want to look at for the land development code as part of that process. The city administrator put together a memo, basically with some staff recommendations for council to consider, possible action on. One of them being, looking at adopting some existing documentation, which may not be the right documentation that we want to use for the PUD. That's all to say that this item is going to take more time than the 5 minutes that we have left in this council meeting. But for me, it's something that I want to make sure that we do have follow-up on, so that council can give direction to staff on what process and the scope of that process, so that there is not a confusing, aspect, or there's less confusion from the villa's residents when it comes to making potential changes to their property. And I think there's also some historical information that's worth, including in this discussion with regards to how the PUD was developed, some of the changes that have happened since to our code, which were not part of the original PUD, that I would like to also for council to be, be informed about as we talk about this. So I know that Mr. Ponder made some comments on engagement HQ, which I'd recommend also having some more time to go and read, but we'll be bringing this back at a future council meeting, so that also gives an opportunity for this to actually have a full discussion rather than just, the 4 minutes that we've left before we have to close. Council, though, I do want to ask if there are any questions on this specific item that staff or I can help answer before we bring it back at the July 15th meeting. Or potentially, I want to make sure we have the right agenda list for that one, but at one of our next meetings. Councilor Rosegard?
Has legal reviewed all of this?
Yes, legal assisted me in drafting the memo and with the recommendations. And we actually have some additional consulting with legal. I think a rewrite of the memo with some additions would be good. And I would recommend that when we bring it back on July 15th, it's just as it is now, a presentation and discussion only. So we can, discuss, staff and legal can make recommendations. We can hear from council, we can hear from members of the public. So again, I think this should come back as a presentation only and discussion on July 15th.
Right.
I think we don't have enough time to get into it.
So,
I have to talk
Council,
really fast.
I will be bringing this back with hopefully some additional revisions to the memo, and we can discuss it at our next council meeting. Appreciate Rossi sticking around for this whole meeting. You gave some valuable inputs to other items, so hopefully it was worth your time as well. All right. With that, Councilor Medicus.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Is there a second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right. We are adjourned at 9:57 p.m. Certainly appreciate staff, you hanging around for we were due for a long meeting.